人物要吸收陽光進行光合作用。光合作用是什麼來的？光合作用。
個眼神可以再 sharp 啲。
突破聽障界限。手語我真係唔識嘅，好想多謝人工耳蝸，因為佢俾咗一個機會我可以做翻一個正常人，好順利。幾次喎？
資訊同你唔同㗎。
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn Hines, and this is the YouTube channel / podcast for ex-pizza film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Adam Wong to talk about his latest feature film, The Way We Talk, which is a film that I am very intrigued by, and a film in a genre. I don't know if there's even a name for a genre like this, but it's a film about these young people in Hong Kong. They're early 20-somethings in Hong Kong, and they are in a part of the deaf community. So we have Sophie, she's partially deaf, which meaning she uses a cochlear implant, or they call it a CI in the film. And I'm going to pull up the names of the actors now. And she's played by Suet Ying Chung. And then there is Wolf Yip, who is profoundly deaf, and he is played by Neo Yau. And Alan Ning, who's played by Marco Suk Ho Young. And Alan has some partial hearing. He uses a cochlear implant as well. And so these three young people, the film is about how their outlook on life as young people, but also their outlook on life with hearing disabilities and how the world sees them, or some days how the world chooses not to see them. And the film is about communication and sign language and accommodations and discrimination and all of these complex social issues. And I'm so excited to be joined by Adam to talk about this, because if anyone has seen any of my previous interviews, especially films about disability, you guys know how passionate I am about that, because I myself am disabled. I have multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia. I'm dyslexic, but I also have auditory processing issues. So films like this are very near and dear to my heart. But first of all, thank you, Adam, for taking the time for speaking with me on your busy schedule, because you're getting ready for screenings here in New York and then later in Toronto. But thank you. Yay.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for taking the time for talking with me. Usually I like to start my interviews first by asking my directors to say a bit about themselves and how they got into filmmaking, because this is your sixth film. You have The Way We Dance, When Becca Met Owen, The Way We Talk, and She Remembers, He Forgets. And a lot of I think all of your films are about young people. And I'm very fascinated by directors who focus on making films about young people. So tell me about, what is it about film that made you decide, I want to be a filmmaker, but what is it that made you decide I want to write films and make films about young people? I'm fascinated by that.
Okay, this is a hard part. Because I have been into it. I have been into this topic without realizing that this is very special to other people's eyes. I don't know. Actually, I would say I don't know why I'm particularly interested in young people. And my first film is called When Becca Met Owen, you just mentioned. actually it's about kids. Yeah, it's about two kids who like playing soccer, and they become very friendly to each other. And one day, one of them suspect that this kind of friendship has some gay relationship in it, and he has some homophobia as a kid. As a kid, so you have the concept of being gay is a shameful.
Yeah.
A kid of like 12 years old. So yeah, that was my debut in feature film. And after that, right, most of my films are about young people. Maybe I try to explain it without not 100% sure. Maybe because I like to portray some people whom I have the living experience. Like when I was 30, I like to depict, the teenage people. When I become older, then I like to depict the people who have their living experience that I just passed.
Yeah.
So maybe it can be a kind of reflection of a status, earlier status of my life, because I've just gone through some status in my life, and I have some feeling. I got some experience. I got some learning, yeah, and I've got some insight. So of an earlier status of my life. So those issues would directly has an impact on me very directly. So maybe if I try to explain it, maybe. So you can notice the age of my previous film is getting a little bit older one after another. So maybe this could be a reason.
Yeah, maybe when you're in your 70s, you'll make films about people in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. But as you get older, you'll do like the decade before.
Right, but it's never like a principle. I'm grabbing it, not like that. It just comes naturally. And also another reason may be why I'm always into young people life is because of my job. I'm a teacher. Yeah, I teach in the university. So basically, every day I'm getting along with young people like in their around 20s. Yeah, they're making their short film, yeah, in the school. So I'm a teacher of them. So I talk to them. I know their life. And many of their living experience they share with me inspire my creative work too.
And you see, and this is always, I always say this, I'm like a stuck record, but I love asking that question first because I sometimes get to learn a bit more, not only about the filmmakers, but their outlook on life as filmmakers and as people. But then sometimes I find a lot of filmmakers, when I ask them that question, it's a question they've never actually thought about before. Like, why do I make film? Like, why do I make these particular types of films? Sometimes filmmakers are like, I have no idea. I just do, And then like sometimes they start reflecting and they were like, you know what? Maybe this is why. And so I love asking that question. And then you saying that you're a teacher, I was fascinated with this film because I'm not a trained teacher, but I've worked in a public school here in Toronto for almost 10 years. And like back home in Barbados, where I'm originally from, I've worked with kids. I've worked with kids for a good number of years in my life. And children are fascinating to me because as we as adults get older, sometimes we forget how we were as kids. We forget. And people say it's not looking at only at the exuberance of life, but at how observant kids are. I love watching how observant kids are. Kids pick up on so much, and they're so much smarter than a lot of adults give them credit for. And in this film, like I was watching part of it with my sister, and she's like, and so I was explaining to her, she was watching it with me, and I was talking about like I love when films are set in schools in a way because schools are like microcosms of society. Right. So the way schools operate says a lot about the society that they're existing in. And this film, I think, says a lot about, because the film starts in 2005 and it tells us a lot about where Hong Kong was in 2005 culturally and socially with regards to disability rights and advocacy and acceptance of people with disabilities. Not only, I think, with people with hearing impairment, but I think with other disabilities. It was at a point in time, and not just in Hong Kong, but like globally, where people are like, we want disabled people to fit into our life. We don't want to accept them as they are. you know, and I think as a teacher, like you get the perspective of how that worked in a classroom, you know, because you could have said it outside a classroom, you know, you could have had the interactions with the kids happening outside the classroom, but setting it and beginning it in a classroom, I think says a lot about your outlook as a teacher. And you're saying this is how the education system is building these kids up to accept being discriminated against from very young. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about just being a teacher and how being a teacher informs you as a filmmaker.
Okay, so how you're asking how my teaching influenced my creative?
Yeah, how her teaching influences you as a creator. Yeah.
Actually, I think the two parts of my life are important and they're interrelated. Yeah. Since I'm making feature films, and like in my case, and in the case in Hong Kong, we don't. I couldn't make feature films one after another. First of all, we don't have that much resources, and nowadays, you know, in the Hong Kong film market, is very fortunate. It's almost impossible for a director of my generation to have to make a feature film one after another. So I don't make. So like in 5 years, like my last film was 5 years before. And then I have this latest one that released in this year. So in between making films, I need practice, right? So teaching is like a practice of me. It's like a mind gym for me. When I keep talking to students, giving comment to their work, I'm like doing gym in my creative mind. And also every time I make a feature film, I think I learn a whole bunch of things. And I can review it and share it to the students. So I think these two parts interrelate with each other quite well in my life.
And talk to me about beginning the film in The Way We Talk in a classroom. And in 2005 specifically, you chose a very specific year to begin the film. Why the classroom and why 2005?
Okay, it's related to the issue of deaf educations in reality. And it's not just the case in Hong Kong, but all over the world. Actually, it was not until 2010 that sign language is officially allowed and is officially promoted as an official teaching medium in deaf school. Yeah. Before that, the International Deaf Education Association, there's a specific term which I didn't prepare. Sorry, I forgot how to name the whole thing. There's an organization about deaf education, and in early, I think it's during the 19th century, the late 19th century, 18 something, they make an official announcement that sign language shouldn't be encouraged as a teaching medium, because it was believed that by using sign language, it will hinder the deaf people to learn to speak orally, and they cannot be included in the mainstream hearing world. This has been the trend. This has been the belief in the deaf education. It was not until 2010 that this international deaf education organization admit that this is not correct. This is wrong. And then after that, they encourage any method to help the deaf people to get education. Yeah, we should respect their right for them to learn the most effective way for them to learn. So why my film set in 2025? Because the story starts from an age where these two kids went to deaf school and sign language is banned. It's a forbidden language in the school, but they love sign language. So this is the core of the conflict of this film.
No, and I love that because I was doing a bit of research and there's an organization or it's a platform called the Hong Kong Sign Language Browser. And what they're doing on this browser is people can go on and add sign language, Hong Kong Sign Language to be specific, because they don't want the language to go extinct. So like this database is a way for them to compile all the signs in Hong Kong Sign Language and also teach people it. It's a way to, and I thought it was so fascinating because it doesn't, and like there aren't that many signs right now as I'm looking at it now, and it was only updated today. There's only a total of 9,889 entries for individual Hong Kong Sign Language signs. And I thought that was interesting, because it shows that people are consciously thinking about preserving the language. It's about, because had that policy not been implemented in 2010, as you're saying, Hong Kong Sign Language could have eventually begin to go extinct, which is something that Wolf talks about in the film. He's like, if we keep pushing deaf people to only speak orally and to use cochlear implants and to be ashamed of using sign language, it can go extinct. And I think that's such a profound message to come from a young person, in particular, and a young deaf person, because there's so many and because it's an issue, it's a global issue of languages becoming extinct. Here in North America, there's a concern of indigenous languages going extinct, and some have gone extinct because of genocide. If entire tribes and entire people are genocided, that means their language goes extinct. There's some parts in like I was doing some research again, like in Hawaii has its own sign language, and they're now doing research to get people who know indigenous Hawaiian sign language to work with these organizations to preserve the language. So talk to me about that in the film, and having such a person like Wolf. I love Wolf. He's like he's a character that I relate to because he loves being deaf, because he's like, this is who I am, but he loves sign language as a way of communication. He's like, I don't want my language to go extinct, and he calls it his mother tongue. Talk to me about Wolf and using this character as a way to send this message that Hong Kong Sign Language is as important to preserve as, I would say, as Cantonese is.
Right. Actually, I think there are two layers of this issue. Why sign language need to be preserved. First of all, is a cultural issue. Yeah. If we talk about it is a culture, once this sign language is, I shouldn't say once because it's still continuing. Because this sign language is a very precious language that for some people, they are using it daily. It's the most communicative language for them. It's their mother tongue. No matter how less and less people are using it, we should preserve it, right? So this is a cultural reason. It is beyond a functional reason. But also we have to talk about maybe on a more practical, in a more realistic sense, sign language need to be preserved and carry on. And for a very simple reason, because many deaf people need sign language to communicate. Although cochlear implant, CI, is improving, the technology is improving, it is helping more and more people. Before, many people are forced to use CI even though they are not functioning so well to them. They're forced, like the character Sophie in the movie, that CI doesn't function in her head very well, but still, with the belief of orally speaking is the norm. So she is forced to speak and, unconsciously being prohibited, not encouraged to use sign language. But realistically, there are many deaf people when this technology, CI, or the condition of their deafness would not allow them to use oral language effectively, then sign language becomes the most effective way to express themselves and to communicate. So depriving this right of using sign language is, I think, is against human right. So I think it's their right as a civilized society. We should preserve sign language for them to continue to grow, to live, effectively.
No, I agree. To me, it is a violation of human rights. It's telling deaf people, your way of communicating with us isn't good enough for us. And when I say us, I'm meaning society, like the idea of normal people who are who are non-disabled, and even people who are disabled, because you have, like, for instance, people who wear glasses. People never really think of wearing glasses as assistive devices, without our glasses, we can't see. We're like partially, I'm like, I take off my glasses and everything is a haze, and like, but there's people who don't think, oh, like wearing glasses is an assistive aid, where using cell phones as a way is an assistive aid. When we travel overseas and we're traveling to a country that we are like, for instance, who are English speakers, and we don't speak English, we use translation apps, those are assistive devices, but people don't think of that way, because way too many people still today see disability as something to be ashamed of, see disability as something to hide and to not accommodate. And sadly, many people who are like that are the parents of children who are disabled. And I want to talk about the parents, because I love that you show different types of parents in this film. Like, for instance, Wolf's family, they're deaf, and they use sign language, and they're warm, and they're so communicative, they're so expressive. Whereas Sophie's mother is very distant from her, because from young, she's told Sophie, don't use sign language. There's even a scene where she hides Sophie's eyes. So she can't see a young Wolf and a young Alan signing. And I thought that scene it's such a small moment. It's like it happens and you blink and you miss it. But that says so much about her own mother, and like how her own mother feels about deafness, feels about sign language. And then there's Alan's mom, who accepts her son being deaf. She accepts him having a cochlear implant. She accepts him using sign language, but she doesn't use sign language. Like when she meets Wolf, she doesn't talk to Wolf in sign language.
A little bit, because of his son finally used sign language, so the mother know a little bit sign language, like this is Hong Kong sign language. Good evening, and thank you.
But she's not fluent. She's not proficient in like her son's way of communicating. So talk to me about the parents, like when you were like, what, I need to show these different types of parents.
Right, of course, parents how parents expect their kids to grow up, is a very important part, forming the personality of that person. So I know this movie. The first step when I want to talk about these identity issues in this movie, and I learned that the spectrum of deafness is very wide. So I choose to have three deaf people who have three different conditions of deafness, and they represent three different kinds of true self. Right. So first I have this character first, and then I date back to their childhood, how they grow up, what kind of parents they would have. And I get many resources from the very long-term research of this movie. And normally those deaf, the capital letter D, deaf, they treasure the deaf identity very much. Normally, this kind of deaf people was born in a deaf family, because they are more tends to think that being deaf is inborn essence of their life. It's some inborn thing. And sign language is their very natural language, and their whole family, is using sign language to communicate. And in my observation, normally this kind of family have a very warm and very close relationship. So naturally, I would depict the Wolf family in this way. They're more easy to get satisfied, because they are a close group in the society. Maybe in reality, they have some difficulty communicating with the hearing world, but among them, they develop very close relationship, in the family. Of course, they're exceptional case, but if all of them are deaf, normally they have this kind of relationship, according to my research. It's the same case in Hong Kong and also in some cases overseas too. And Sophie, the case was like she was born hearing, but because of some sickness, she become deaf. She lost her hearing abilities at the age of 5 years old. So in this way, as a hearing parent, it's very easy to understand. A hearing parent would want to bring back hearing to this to the kid, like, because you are born hearing. And I shouldn't use this term normal, but as a hearing parent, if you don't have particular concern on the issue of deafness, you would naturally think deafness is a loss. It's some inefficiency compared to a normal world. So, if my kid lose the ability to hear, I would regard it as a loss. So I will try my all means to want to cure this lacking, right? So, but whether the kid can, how well the kid can be benefit to get back hearing from all these measures, it varies from case by case. I know some case parents have a deaf kid. They have cochlear implant since very early at the age. I know the earliest case of having cochlear implant was surgery was before 1 year old, and that kid growing up with a cochlear implant, and he could speak orally pretty well. And then the parents use lots of time, spends lots of time training their language, oral language, as in the kid, and they develop a very close relationship. Yeah, and of course I respect them. I really respect the effort that these parents and this kid try so much and spend so much effort to learn to accommodate with this mainstream hearing world. But also there are cases like the kid become deaf at early age, and then the parents, of course, want them to learn to speak orally, and all those using all those hearing aid devices, and but it doesn't function so well in their case. So their whole growing up, lots of time is spent on learning sign language, and lots of time is to learn how to accommodate to this hearing world in a rather twisted way. For example, they have to learn how to pretend to understand, right? Because if I really cannot understand what the teacher is saying for most of the time, it's not like, if I spend more effort, I can understand more. It is impossible because it's more like a physical thing, right? So they have to, for example, they have to spend lots of time doing preparation, after school. So when other kids can play, can have their relaxed time, can have entertainment, but you just, you have to keep studying all day long, to prepare for the next day class. Or in some gathering, you have to learn to, if I cannot understand what the people say, how should I react? Or I should keep some standard answer in my pocket. Whenever in some situation I don't know how to behave, I can use this answer to communicate with people. So your whole growing up experience become a twisted one, not real. It is not a healthy way of growing up. So so this is I don't. This is not a healthy process of growing up. So if the parent doesn't realize that sign language can be the right for their kids as most effective medium to express themselves, then sometimes there will be some tragedy. It will just there tragedy. I know some cases like that in my long-term research because of kids. They are forced to use sign language. They don't have a happy childhood. They're growing up as a very sad people. And there's a case in Hong Kong. Finally, this girl finally committed suicide because her whole life was not happy.
And that's the thing, right? Because it's like people, with regards speaking about the parents, they don't find a way to compromise, to meet things in the middle. And that's, I kind of see like Alan's mom as an example of that, because she allowed him to go to this, like he went to the school and he learned sign language, but he also had to first he had a hearing aid first, and then he got the cochlear implant. So I kind of see like Alan's mom as an example of how parents can be accepting, but also still encouraging their children, to seek different avenues of communication. And the thing is, so he sits in the middle of that, because he sits in the middle of the extremes where you have like Wolf, who's like, I will not get a cochlear implant. He's like, I will not. He doesn't really like using speaking orally. He's like, I will use sign language because this is how I communicate with people, and people should learn to communicate with me. And then you have Sophie, who's on the other end, who knows no sign language and who only speaks orally and reads lips. And she relies on her cochlear implant, which has bad connections. It's always filled with static. So she herself does what you're talking about, where they're trying to like bluff their way through communicating with people, because she can't pick up everything. So she has to read between the lines of conversations with people to get a full picture, because she doesn't hear everything 100%. And I thought that was so interesting, where you have a character like Alan who sits in the middle of this. But I also love that you showed like even with cochlear implants, it is not 100% effective. Even with these devices, deaf people still have to pretend to understand something they don't. Like they themselves, like the technology, not only technology, but like the society is failing them, because people assume that she's hearing everything 100% because of the implant. But she's not. But she doesn't feel comfortable enough to tell them, I can't understand what you're saying. She doesn't ask people to repeat themselves. She just bluffs her way through. So talk to me about Sophie, because she's so interesting in that way. She's like, and the sound first, and again, I have to give kudos to the sound designer. The sound designer, I think, did a spectacular job. Really getting that static, like there is like just filled with static, and in between all of this, we're hearing bits and pieces of her conversation and what she's saying. So, but talk to me about Sophie and working with Suet, and figuring out who Sophie would be as a character on screen and working with the actress.
Right. Actually, to be honest, on the first day, I get interest in this topic of deaf identity. I was thinking to put Wolf as the center of the story, because what impressed me the most from the first day was the idea of deaf identity, that some deaf people would never consider the possibility of hearing. So this must come from a very, very confidence of grabbing yourself. So naturally, I would think Wolf as a capital letter D deaf would be the center of the story. But later, when I do more research, I know some example, which is like the case of Sophie. Several examples, like they are born hearing, but at a very young age, they lose their hearing. So their parents become so depressed, and because the parents love their kids, and out of this love, they want their kids to retain back the hearing ability. So they spend so much effort training their kid, even quitting their job, in order to spend more time teaching the kid to how to speak and chase back up to the schoolwork, right? But the more if it goes natural, if it go, it's not always succeed, because it's more like a physical thing of the kid. If they really cannot hear, they cannot pick up as much oral language as the parent expect. You cannot force them, but still they are forced to grow up in a hearing world. So they are not happy. They are not happy, and they are all the way in their growing up. They have been living under very high pressure. Yeah. So, and I found this kind of character is very difficult to depict when I start writing the first draft and second draft of the story, because they are somewhere in between. They're living, their existence is always like in an insecure situation. Yeah. And in my research, I know several cases. They were like and I don't know why coincidentally these examples are all girls, are all female. Yeah. In their early 20s, they start to know there's something called sign language in the world. Of course, they're not as ignorant that they don't know sign language, but they never consider sign language as a medium to communicate because they don't identify themselves as a deaf person. They may identify themselves as just a people who has the hearing doesn't function so well. So they try to perform better, by hearing or by reading lips or by, speaking as much as they can. But then later at their early 20s, they start to learn sign language. Yeah, and it opened up, it's like opened up a new door of their life. Their life are like brightened up at that moment. Yeah, but in these cases, they have one similarity. After they want to start using sign language, their parents worry about them so much. And their parents even think they betray them. Why I spend so much time in your childhood to teach you to speak orally, to read lips, or speak orally, is because I don't want you to be a deaf person. And now you come to the world of, doing sign language. So they feel very lost. These parents feel very lost. And these girls has to struggle with their parents. So, and there are different cases, there are different outcomes. There's one case, a very sad case, a very tragic case in Hong Kong. Finally, this girl, because when she started to learn to use sign language, she was also discriminated by the deaf people, the deaf people using sign language in the circle. Because the deaf people who use sign language from day one in their life think that you don't learn sign language earlier, and you got all the privilege as a hearing lost person. Yeah, because you got all the aura of a very, a very positive figure. Try to overcome your difficulties of hearing, and you become studying so well in the school, and then you didn't learn sign language. And now as 20-something, you start to learn sign language. So the sign language user cannot immediately accept her. So in this case, this girl, finally, she's like one step, before turning over a new page of her life, but she cannot get there. So, and finally, it end up this girl she choose to end up her life. Yeah, jumping off from a fall. It's a very tragic case, in the Hong Kong deaf community. And because of that case, many people in Hong Kong concerned the right of using sign language. Yeah, and also there are cases they succeed to go to the sign language world. They succeed to have a better deal with their parents. Okay, I'm already 20-something, so you allow me to use sign language, but I will still keep talking to you as much as I can. And there are some cases like in the middle. They still don't have a very good relationship with the parents. The parents still don't know how to take that my girl starting to use sign language and identify themselves as deaf people, but somehow keeping in a middle situation. Yeah. So there are different cases like that. So I found that this kind of issue is not so easy for a hearing person to understand. If you have been having your life for 30, 40-something years, living as a hearing person, and you never, have a knowledge about the deafness issue, and you don't have a friend who has this kind of issue, it's very hard for a hearing person to get into the world of this kind of situation. Yeah. The questions I always get from some of my friends is It's like, why they cannot use both sign language and keep using CI? Why not both? Right? So to me, I can easily answer this kind of question, but yeah. So anyway, I think this kind of issue is not so easy to understand. So I think I have to put more details to depict the living condition of Sophie. That is why I put so much effort in depicting, her hearing world. In the sound design, I spend lots of effort, putting all those ideas, all those feeling, those people who use CI and not functioning so well, what they tell me, what difficulty they told me. I try to grab this feeling and then put all these ideas, into the sound design, working together with the sound designer. Yeah. So I put lots of effort in it, and I also put lots of effort depicting the relationship between Sophie and her mother, because Sophie's case need to be explained more. So, and then gradually Sophie become more like a central figure in this trial relationship of these three people in this story.
And that's interesting because your film made me think of the film Sound of Metal. And the reason it made me think of Sound of Metal is not only because of the sound design, but the character Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, he was a grown adult when he lost his hearing, because he was a drummer in a band, and because he subjected his hearing to all of this high frequency noise, and he never protected it. He never worried about protecting his hearing. He lost it, and he struggled with losing the film goes through him losing his hearing and the tinnitus and all of the static that goes with that, but then also the process of getting a cochlear implant and realizing this isn't working for me, the cochlear implant just wasn't working for him, and he chose to be deaf. He chose deafness, and then he went to learn sign language. And I kind of saw this similarity in both of your films where you're explaining how as adults, deaf people who lose their hearing, in a sense, Sophie lost hers as a child at 5, but she had to learn to adapt to being deaf as an adult in the same way that Riz Ahmed's character had to learn to, she had to learn sign language. She had to learn how to become part of the deaf community as an adult. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to Sound of Metal is about a man, but it's interesting to see it with a woman because there's all of these extra layers as a female that comes with that, how does this affect her as a woman and her relationships with men, how it affects her relationships with other women and how it affects her relationship, not only with her mother, but also at work, And the scene in her interview was so interesting to me where she's speaking and she's proud that she can speak to the interviewers, she's like, I have all of these qualifications, I know the job back and front. And then they ask her one question and that made her doubt herself. They're like, do you know sign language? Can you interpret and help deaf clients when they come? And you can tell that was something that had never ever occurred to her before. She never thought that learning sign language would be a plus for her, that it would be a benefit for her, that it would actually help her in her work. And I thought that was such a fascinating thing to show on screen, because again, so many people think again of deafness as a disadvantage. They don't see sign language as an actual language, because when you go for a job here in Canada, the first thing I ask you, are you fluent in French? If you're going for a job at a company that deals with regards to work in Asia, they would say, do you know Mandarin? Do you know Japanese? Do you know Korean? Do you know Cantonese? That's a plus. Learning another language is a plus, but no one ever looks at learning sign language as a plus, as a benefit. And I love that you put that in the film. So I have to thank you, first of all, because I was when I saw that scene, it was just I love that you did that. To show that for her, being deaf is an advantage, So talk to me about that, because I thought it's a small scene, but again, your film has so much small scenes that I just love, and I love that one aspect, just that one thing where you acknowledge saying language is a benefit. It's a language. You're bilingual. You're a polyglot. You know different ways of communicating.
Right. Actually, most of the ideas, most of the elements, most of the issues depicted in this film comes from a long-term research of me in this topic. So, you just explain all your insight is very correct, right? Sophie never consider sign language is something she need to know, in her whole life, and it's true too. Yeah, I have been knowing some CI person, they have never considered sign language as a way, of communication, because it goes against the deep down belief, of their issues. Yeah, I am not good at hearing, so I have to tackle this. The way to tackle this is I have to do something to make me hear, as good as possible by, doing cochlear implant, right? If my cochlear implant doesn't work, just try to fix it. Yeah, if it cannot help enough, then try to read lips more, right? And if I cannot catch up teacher's work, I have to pay extra effort. Yeah, never consider sign language as a medium. So all these ideas come from my research, from the reality.
How many years of research were you doing for this film? When did the idea for doing this film come to you?
Okay, I remember the first day I was confirmed that I want to make this topic. It was in the middle of 2019. So starting from there, I started to do research, and then the film production, the shooting start in 2023. So all along, I've been doing different research, talking to different deaf people, visiting, the organization that serve the deaf people, the sign language education organization, talking to professor, and visiting deaf people. Like I don't know the case in other countries, but in Hong Kong, there are lots of people working in the car washing company. I don't know why. Maybe just coincidentally, one or two deaf people work well in the car washing industry, so more and more people do that. So I visit their working situation, and also I see some doctor. They tell me about the knowledge of CI and what the patient's thinking and how do they see the hearing loss in a more medical way. And of course, very importantly, I have to learn sign language myself. So I remember it all happens during the COVID time. Yeah.
So are you fluent in Hong Kong sign language now?
No. I'm still like a kindergarten level in sign language. But I always emphasize that this learning sign language experience is very important to me in writing this script. Yeah. There are many scenes that is directly come from my inspiration. Yeah, how much I got impressed by learning sign language, particularly the first 1 and 2 lessons. Yeah, I know that to learn sign language, the best way is to learn from a deaf sign language user. So I did it, and but maybe I didn't expect that. Maybe vaguely, my expectation was like, okay, I learned from a deaf teacher, and I'm a hearing person. There must be a medium in the middle, right? Maybe there is a hearing interpreter. It can serve as a bridge between hearing student and the deaf teacher. But it doesn't go that way. I and a few hearing students just stay in the classroom, and then the deaf teacher just come, and then gradually the first lesson start. I know nothing about sign language. The only sign language before I come to class maybe was this, means thank you in Hong Kong sign language. Maybe I only know this. How do I learn? If you tell a person who are not never have this concern, maybe it's a very amazing. How do you learn sign language from a deaf teacher without an interpreter in the middle? But it just happened. So it's very impressive to me, the magic, the power of gesture of this visual language is, it seems to me, I was like witnessing the birth of a new language, which is a visual language. So with this very much fascination, I put this feeling into the scene where Sophie learned sign language for the first time from Jishun in the food store, the outdoor food store in Hong Kong. We call it 大排檔. I don't know whether you know the term. Yeah, it's like dim sum, like what's that, kung fu, this kind of term.
You mean a dim sum restaurant?
No. I mean that kind of food store, outdoor food store in Hong Kong.
Dai
Pai Dong, yeah.
Oh, Dai Pai Tong. Oh, we call them just like street markets.
Yeah, street markets.
Or food markets, yeah. Yeah. But and another aspect of the film that I love, I'll tell you the thing that really made me want to speak to you is when I watched the trailer and I saw scuba diving. And the reason that I saw scuba diving, because I'm from Barbados, I'm from the Caribbean, and I love the ocean, and I've been scuba diving a couple of times. I didn't get PADI certified, but I've scuba dived I think twice. But what really made me intrigued was because I'm like, of course, because under this in the ocean, scuba divers use sign language to communicate. You know, and it's not like ASL or anything, but it's their own language, their own way to communicate underwater, because you can't hear and you can't speak underwater, you know, it's muffled. And the only way to communicate with each other is through gesticulation, you know? So when I saw that, I was like, of course, that I'm like, he gets it, you know? And Wolf, you loves diving, you know, he loves scuba diving. He wants to be a certified scuba instructor. And I think one of the reasons that intrigues me with this character in particular is that he can communicate on land and he can communicate underwater, and he's using and he's able to communicate using sign language. Two different modes. There's the Hong Kong sign language on land, but when he's in scuba diving, he has to use the international. I guess we would call it like international scuba sign language, because there's specific signs you have to use to communicate. You know, because he has to teach people who are like tourists. You know, and he has to learn how to communicate with them underwater. And so when I saw that, I was so happy that you included that. So talk to me about just this. Like, people might be like, why is she talking about scuba diving? But I just love that you put that in, because you're showing like we use sign language in so many different ways that we don't even like gesticulating. The way we talk with our hands is a way to express what we're thinking. You know, like, I'm a hand talker. I talk with my hands a lot. You know, so like
and actually, first of all, for the scene that I depict in the movie. The deaf diver under the sea, they talk each other in sign language. Those are Hong Kong sign language, not particularly scuba divers sign language.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Of course, I know whoever dive, whether you're a hearing person or deaf people, you have to learn some sign, you know, to have some basic communication skill. In case of emergency, at least you know you can communicate with each other. But there's an advantage for deaf people. If you know sign language, you can just continue to use the own sign language to communicate in the under the water. Yeah, and actually, that deaf diver signing underwater is the very first mental picture in my mind that made me get interested into deaf culture. And later, I learned something about deaf identity. Okay. Talking about this, I have to date back to 5 years ago. I read a short script. Yeah. I was impressed by a short script, a script of a short film. There was a scene depicting deaf people doing sign language in the underwater. It was the first time I learned that actually doing sign language has an advantage, you know, over oral language. I never considered that, you know, in underwater, as you said, you know, you cannot speak orally. Yeah, we cannot hear. So sign language becomes, you know, if you know sign language, deaf people who know sign language have the advantage. So that gave me so much insight. So sometimes whether something has an advantage or a disadvantage is conditional, you know. So I start to get more interested in sign language, and then I talked to the script writer of this short script, who later become the first script writer of this script, the way we talk. And because she's a hearing person, and she have lots of deaf friends, and she herself also knows sign language. So she started to talk to me so much about her understanding of deaf culture. And I start to learn that, okay, you can see deafness as a culture rather than disability. And then later, I I also was very impressed by the concept of deaf identity. And yeah, as earlier I said, that become the moment that I decided to make a film on this topic. So once it started, of course, this first picture of deaf people doing sign language underwater becomes a scene, very naturally in the first draft of this story. And and when I start to do more research, it shows to me that it is true that many deaf friends I know are very fond of diving. Yeah, and it is true that they like to talk with sign language underwater. And it's not just as simple as like hearing people when they dive, they may just use some language to do some basic instruction. But these deaf people really like to talk everything under the water. And I think it's a very fascinating, right? They're like talking about their gossiping or talking about some, daily life talk. They can even make a poem under the water. Yeah, so of course, this scene is preserved in the very early stage of the script.
That's interesting. They have full conversations during diving. So is that typical for you? Like when you're coming up with an idea for a film, does it usually start with just one image in your head? Like you just suddenly get like an image of something random and you'll be like, this is an idea for a film. Is that how it usually works for you?
Maybe, yeah. The same thing, because I'm into it, I didn't realize how much I'm different from other people. But yeah, I think I'm a visual person. So yeah, in my past creation, the image, the impression of an image is very important for the inspiration of my creative work. Yeah, and but as I grow more in my professional life, as in my creative life, I think a concept is also very important. A topic is also very important, but maybe deep down image is very important to me too. Yeah.
And you mentioned the script writer. So the film has 3 credited script writers. There's 1,000 Springs, Hong Ho, and Seeking. Talk to me a bit about them.
Okay. The first script writer is Seeking. Seeking is that short film script writer I told you earlier. She was the first script writer of this The Way We Talk script. Yeah, but she doesn't have. She's a very experienced reporter, and she wrote several books before too, and she has some experience of writing short script. But she also had one experience of writing very commercial feature film too, but maybe not very successful. So to write the script of a feature film is kind of a new experience to her. And I told her from the first day, of course, if you can finish your own script, only on your, if you don't, you can handle it independently, I would appreciate so much. But in my experience, I've honestly told her it is very hard to achieve it just on your own. So very likely in the middle of the process, I need to take part. Yeah, because I will direct the movie, after all. So, and it also goes this way. Yeah, up to a certain part, I think she reached the climax of her own resources and her own ability. Then I take turns to write according to how I envision this film how it will become. So I take part in the middle, but I think this topic is very complicated, and I got so much comment from my friends, which made me feel so frustrated. I think I pay so much effort explaining some phenomenon, and it has a strong impact on me, but it doesn't reach everyone. So I'm kind of frustrated, and so then it passed to my wife, 1,000 Springs, because she has been. We have been talking on every issues every day. And so she knows my ability. She knows what I'm good at, what I'm bad at. So at a certain point, she walk into this script writing process, and she give lots of comment, and maybe because she joined later, she has a more fresh eye on the issues of this case. She know how a hearing person would not understand some point, and what point you need to have more details to analyze. So yeah, she helps a lot in making this movie having a clear shapes. And then the fourth one is Ho Hong. Ho Hong is also the producer of this movie. Her help is Ho Hong's help. Ho Hong participation is more like on the finalizing the script in the last stage by providing more daily life texture, and it's often like he refined the dialogues. Yeah, the dialogues part. So
and now talk. Yeah. Sorry, and so now talk to me about the cast. I love these three young people that you cast. They're so charismatic on screen. They have such great chemistry together. So talk to me about casting Neo, Suet Ying, and Marco. You know, I believe for Neo and Marco, this isn't their first. For Neo, this isn't his first film. You know, he's been in so a few other films before. And for Marco, I'm here looking at their biographies. Like, he's not a first time actor either. But talk to me about casting them, you know, and like, and like, because you needed characters that are fluent in Hong Kong Sign Language, and like dives, like Neo dives, and Suet Ying dives and stuff. But talk to me about the casting process for them.
Okay, you know little about them, right? Mm-hmm. You know little about them.
I don't think I've ever seen. I haven't seen them before. This is my first time seeing them on screen. So I'm because I'm here looking at I was looking at their IMDb's, and it was just like, they are so good on screen.
Yeah,
they feel like veteran actors, you know. And so like, but then it's just like they're just like, you guys did a phenomenal job, I think, casting them. So talk to me about finding them and working with them.
Actually, Chris, one of them is an actual deaf actor. Can you guess who is it? Who is this one?
I was gonna say Neo, but something's telling me Marco.
Right, actually, it's Marco. Is the actual deaf actor. So, if I have to talk about the cast, I have to say I have very much concern on the deaf participation in the making of this movie. So, actually, to talk wider, actually, almost every deaf role in this movie are played by actual deaf person, except 3 roles. The exceptional case is first Leo and Chung Suet, but Sophie. But Sophie case is a bit in the middle, because her role was like, at first she didn't identify herself as a deaf person, and then later she regard herself as a deaf person. And this role is played by a hearing actress, Chung Suet Ying. Mm-hmm. And the third one was not Marco. Marco was a real deaf. The third one was the kid who played the young Alan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is a coda. Yeah, he's a coda. Okay. But so he started to sign since he was 2 years old to talk to his parents. Yeah, both of his parents are deaf. So except these 3 actors, all the other deaf roles you see in this movie are played by actual deaf person. So I think deaf participation are very important. Yeah, ideally speaking, I know that if all these 3 leads can be played by deaf actors, would be a perfect scenario. But in Hong Kong, it is very difficult to achieve that. Yeah, because we didn't have professional deaf actor for feature film, and now we have, because of this film. Yeah, but before this film we don't. So and luckily we have Marco. I promised myself at least one of these actors who played the lead has to be a deaf actor. Not only the supporting role, but also these leads, at least one of them has to be played by actual deaf person. And very luckily, I find Marco. Marco is a deaf, and he has little acting experience. He act in some very simple short films before, but for feature film, this is his first time. Yeah, and it's not easy for him. And once I confirmed he played the role of Alan, I sponsored him to take acting class actually. Yeah. And I think he did his good job. And as a first time actor for feature film, quite often he used his own personal characteristic. He put a lot of his own characteristic into this role. Yeah. And for the role, Wolf, who is a capital letter DF, he need to, the role Wolf need to sign very, sign like a native language. So it's played by Leo. Leo is a friend of mine. His debut was also my film 10 years ago. She remembers, he forgets. And I can be convinced that he can play this role. First of all, Leo has a very special career path in his own life in Hong Kong. Yeah, many Hong Kong audience will be quite familiar with this part, because he's not like he has a very special career path. Not like other performers in Hong Kong. He fight for his own career, basically. Yeah, he is very unique. He has so much career barrier fighting for his own path as a performer in Hong Kong, and he started his own YouTube channel during the COVID time where he has no job. Yeah, he's a very confident person, and people appreciate him. But I don't know why, for many reasons, he didn't. His career path doesn't go very smoothly. So he create his own career path in this recent year by founding his own YouTube channel. Yeah, and that YouTube channel get very popular in Hong Kong, called Trial and Error. But it's going to end after 5 years. Yeah, and so I think his real life experience can make him understand the character of Wolf. Yeah, but so. And I am very confident in his talent and in his acting skill. So I can confirm he can play the role of Wolf. But the first day I confirmed him, I want you to play this role. The first thing I told him was, you have to truly respect deaf culture. And you have to sincerely understand what is deaf identity. Why Wolf made these choices in this story. Yeah, because you are a hearing person. Acting a deaf role, you have to pay extra effort to understand the issue of deaf culture. And you yourself have, of course, you have to learn sign language from deaf sign language teacher. You have to have their approval. Yeah. Only you have the approval from real deaf person, you can pass, you can get a pass to getting into this role, and he can totally understand that. And and I'm so thankful to him, and I appreciate him so much that he really grabbed this principle. And I'm very satisfied with the outcome.
You should be. Like, they all three did such an amazing job. And Neo, for Wolf, the thing with Wolf is that he's so confident, and so like the way he signs has to be confident too. You know, like he signs with the way he signs tells you a lot about his personality. For all three of them, for all the characters, the way they sign tells you a lot about their personalities, which makes sense because that's the way they speak, and the way we speak as people tells people the way we are, tells people a lot about our personalities. It's a marker. And the reason I figured that Marco was the person who was deaf was like, there's a casualness with the way he carries his body. And this being his first feature film is very impressive because he feels very natural in front of the camera. And just like the way he sits down feels very natural. There's a scene where he's they're in the bedroom, and he's doing the graphic design for the poster for Wolf, for the thing. And just the way he just sits down, has this casual conversation. He feels like a natural in front of the camera, and and like, you can tell how comfortable he is as a person. He's very comfortable in his body. And then for Sophie, she's not comfortable. You know,
Right.
she's a person who she's very very much an observer, you know, like she speaks and she can read lips and she has a cochlear implant, she can hear partially, but she still feels like an outsider amongst hearing people, you know. So the way Suet Ying plays that is like she's very shy, you know, she plays with her hands a lot, you know, and she's very reserved and all of this. So I think all three of them did such a fantastic job. But I will say Wolf is my favorite. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
Wolf, I love. But I think it's probably because he is a scuba diver. But then also he's not making any excuses about being deaf for anyone. You know, he's like, why would I be afraid and ashamed of who I am? You know, and I love that. And I think all three of them are really great examples for young people and for anyone who is hearing or non-hearing or disabled or non-disabled to realize like these deaf people are regular people. You know, they have their own struggles. Apart from their disability, they have to deal with finding a job, you know, they have to deal with brand marketing, like, you know, figuring out how do I make a career out of like washing cars or being a scuba diver, you know, like for Alan, he's like trying to maintain his friendship with Wolf, you know, he's trying to keep this promise that he made. And so they have all of these regular issues that everyone deals with, you know, and I think the film is very much about that, you know, it's very much about, yes, they are that people who are deaf have issues socially with regards to how society sees them as disabled people. But even apart from the disability, they got regular issues to deal with. You know, Sophie has to deal with her mother, you know, like most women, young girls, we can relate to having difficult relationships with our mothers, you know, sometimes our relationships with our mothers aren't easy. So you get that in the film. And so for me, one of the last question I'll ask you before I let you go, the last question I want to ask you is like, how has this film helped you see disabilities in general, not just deafness, but like physical disabilities and what we call it invisible disabilities, like because I have fibromyalgia and multiple sclerosis, and as I mentioned at the beginning, dyslexia and auditory processing issues, all of those are considered invisible disabilities. People looking at me don't realize that I have the physical disabilities. So like, but how has this film and all of your research and working with everyone on the film changed your perception of disability and like the visible and the invisible?
Right. Yeah, it's a very good question. Then I have to praise myself. I think, yeah, and I'm proud. Yeah, this film worked in this way. Yeah, that for example, from the very basic fundamental knowledge about what is deafness, I think this film raised so much concern, you know, in the society. It has created quite a big social impact when it was released in Hong Kong, and actually many audience reaction was like they have never considered there are different kind of deafness. There are deaf people who don't want to be deaf and try to. They will see deafness as a disease and try to cure it. And also they are deaf, something called deaf pride. They are so proud of being deaf and try to preserve their sign language and regarding sign language as their mother tongue. Many audience told reaction was like they never consider that. And this is a new knowledge to me. Yeah. And also there are a small amount of people, even though they get this knowledge from this movie, they seems to have a little bit reservation, thinking that whether I was dramatizing this kind of conflict in the movie. Of course, I would say no. This kind of conflict has been existing for so long. It's a very major issue when we talk about deaf education in all over the world. So I think at least at this point, this movie give a new insight, and yeah, it's a meaningful insight to many audience. Yeah, considering what is the best way to treat so-called disability, or to treat some people who are who are living in a way that is different from the majority of people. Yeah, and it's also raised the concern of thinking, what is inclusiveness? Inclusiveness doesn't mean to include, to absorb the minority, but to respect everyone using their own way and actualizing themselves. Yeah, and on the other hand, what I'm concerned when I'm making this movie, I have to also respect the intention of accommodating. I'm not saying accommodating is compromising. So you are not being real if you want to accommodate with the majority. Of course, people are living in a community. We need to communicate and we need to talk to people. But different people has different conditions. So respecting every person's having the best way to stay in the world is very important. On the other hand, the desire, the willingness to communicate and to accommodate with this world is also a good thing. So this is the thing I want to raise in this movie, and I think it can reach people. So, and it's also, I can see audience and organizations, NGO, many charity groups having, organizing some, some screening for a group of people to watch this film and then have lots of discussion. So I think this film is successful in raising this kind of concern in the society.
And I can see, and I hope that a lot more people do take it to heart. And I would also recommend people. There's a film. I actually did an interview yesterday for a film with a filmmaker, a Korean filmmaker who has a film showing at Fantasia called Noise. And two of the protagonists are deaf. They're hearing impaired. They use hearing aids. But the reason I mention that is because that film is a horror film. It's a film centered around deaf people and how deafness can actually be an advantage in some situations. And I think when you have filmmakers like yourself and the other filmmaker, Kim Soo-bin, what people can realize is when more filmmakers keep using deaf actors, casting deaf actors to play not only characters in films where deafness is a central point of the story, but just playing regular people, but they just happen to be deaf. It will help people to stop looking at deafness and other disabilities as something to be stigmatized, as something to look at as a burden, so they are people, and we can have films about people with all of these different disabilities and have all of these profound stories and these interesting stories and these interesting characters. And we can see them existing on land or in the ocean, scuba diving, and I'm always so happy with filmmakers like you who do it with a genuine respect and come from a place of understanding and wanting to understand and to learn more. That comes through in your film. That your film is very much about teaching people, but you can see that you yourself learned so much with your research and your with making this film, and how careful you are with all of just the small details that you added in. That shows intention. And I have to thank me personally. I have to thank you for that, because there's not many films that are like that about disabled people, where we are not the gimmick. We are not the punchline, we are not the thing to be made fun of. We are to be respected and to be seen and to be valued as just as quote unquote normal people in a regular story. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let you go now because I know you're going to have a very busy week coming up with your in Toronto, New York and Toronto. But first of all, again, thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me. And congratulations
Thank
to
you, Carol.
And everyone, and the entire cast and crew and everyone who worked on the film.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you
I'll let Leo knows you like him.
Yes,
Okay.
you please feel free to tell him. No, honestly, I really enjoyed his character. I love how proud he was. I just love that he was with that scene on the beach. I was just like, yes, I love how proud he is. And even the scene in the auditorium where he gets up and he's angry, but he's like, there's nothing wrong with being deaf. What is this? And he get up and he walks out. I'm like, yes, get up and walk. Get up and walk out.
Okay.
But I really appreciate that and everything. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Adam.